Metrobank are committed to championing those who make a difference in their cricket community. In a new content series featuring England players, they've surprised 3 grassroots heroes who go above and beyond to drive forward girls' cricket in their local area. Check out the first episode featuring Lauren Bell and Asif from Slough Cricket Club on Metrobank's Instagram and X channels. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. Loads has happened this week. England have named some squads, including one for the T20 World Cup. Lauren's been in the WCPL. The Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy is back. And there's also an interview later on in the show with one of the England newbies, Paige Scholfield. I'm Rana, and with me, as always, but this time from sunny Trinidad, is Lauren Winfield-Hill. Lauren, how's the last week or so been? When we last talked, the competition was just starting and now it's just finished.
Yeah, no, it's been good. It's been a great experience. It's been a different experience captaining, particularly like a lot of players that I didn't know. But yeah, like we narrowly missed out on finals. To be honest, I feel like we probably we probably played better cricket that warranted more. And really, like, the killer blow was the game that went down to a super over and we got Deandra Dottind. But, beyond that, I think we played some really good cricket. And I think especially how we went against Barbados Royals, who then went on to win it. Losing to them only by 1 run in the first game just shows that although, we didn't get where we wanted to get to, we had some pretty close contests in the run for it.
Compared to other tournaments you've played in and worked on, what is different about the CPL? I guess it's obviously short and sharp, only 3 teams. But from terms of like a cricket point of view, overseas signing, how does it compare?
I think standard-wise there's a fair way to go with it. I think with there only being 3 teams, the contests are really, really closely matched. With having 4 overseas in each team, I think the contest is really closely matched. And what you'll see is, every year that new players get drafted, domestic players get drafted. So it's still probably in its infancy, where a lot of the girls, like I know, like one of our young leg spinners, Latchman, she's only started playing cricket 3 years ago, and she's playing in the CPL. So, and the volume of cricket that the girls get all year round is just not that frequent over here in the West Indies. So I think, the standard of competition is good. It's very competitive. It's just probably the next stage will be exposing the domestic players to more cricket more often, basically. But yeah, it's been a fun experience. It's been a good experience, and it's something that I'd definitely come back to.
We had Hayley Matthews on the show a few weeks ago, and she was talking about where West Indies are at the moment and how they're in a bit of a transitional phase. Were there any less well-established names that caught your eye? I was just looking at the scorecards. Samara Ramnath was someone who played a big role in that super over game, bowled a very tight over in the end, or near the end, to sort of push it to a super over that her team won.
Yeah, no, she's an unbelievable talent, really. I think she's only 16 years old and she's a tiny little thing. She's ever so slight, but she's got really good control. And I think it's always a nice thing to see how she fares up against some of the overseas. And it's probably a true test to how good she is. I think she's under 19's captain and she's only 16. So she's been a real find for TKR. She's bowled really nice and she seemed to get better each game. And apparently she's decent with the bat as well. I didn't see a lot of her with the bat, but she's definitely an exciting prospect. Latchman, who was at Guyana with me, a leg spinner, turned to her in the last over and many raised eyebrows, but bowled really nicely under a lot of pressure in the last over and things like that. She didn't get as many overs after that, with left-handers through the middle and lots of off spinners and reasons like that. But she looks a good player. There's a batter that played for TKR, Glasgow, left-hander. She looks like she's a decent bat. So there's definitely talent over here. It's just a case of probably unearthing it and then nurturing it and exposing them to more, like I said, more cricket and more training more often.
You were saying before we started recording that they're particularly excited about Ramnath. A lot of people saying that, they're comparing her to where Hayley Matthews was at a similar point.
Yeah, we were just having a chat about her, and I sort of said after we faced her in the first time that we played him, I said she's got real good control and has got quite a nice simple action. And that, all the local girls were like, yeah, she's really good. Like, she's only 16. She's an absolute gun in the field as well. She's rapid in the field, wants to be in all the hot spots. But yeah, a lot of them were saying, she's a proper all-rounder as well, and shows, as much or if not more promise than what Hayley did at 16, which is a massive call. But just sort of shows how much people think of her over here.
Well, that's really exciting because, as we've talked about, West Indies haven't had like a really big talent emerge for a few years now. Moving from the Caribbean to the UK, England named their T20 World Cup squad this week. The squad was Heather Knight, Lauren Bell, Maya Bouchier, Alice Capsey, Charlie Dean, Sophia Dunkley, Sophie Eccleston, Danny Gibson, Sarah Glenn, Bess Heath, Amy Jones, Freya Kemp, Nat Sitterbrunt, Lindsay Smith and Danny Wyatt. A couple of takeaways from that. Lauren Bell, the only specialist seamer. They've gone for the all-round options of Gibson and Kemp over someone like Lauren Filer, and Bess Heath is the spare keeper bat. Lauren, was that pretty much what you expected, or were there any curveballs in there?
It's pretty much what I expected based on the conditions. I think naturally in T20 cricket, your all-rounders are your prize packages, aren't they? Because I think both Freya Kemp and Danny Gibson can win a game with with bat in hand or with ball in hand, and it seems to be the way that the game's going now. I think the specialists are harder to come by. I know Nick Knight will be devastated that Lauren Filer's not in there. He was banging the drum for her a lot throughout the summer, but you can't help but feel it's on conditions, and I think she had a decent 100 without taking loads of wickets. She bowled some really decent, quick spells. Looked really threatening, but I think, yeah, it's almost like England have had a while to prepare for this World Cup. They thought they were going to Bangladesh, and the thing is, it's all what preparation has gone on behind the scenes, and communication has gone on behind the scenes, where there'll have been a lot of things put in place for it to be in Bangladesh, but also not then changing too much just because the location's changed. Because I'd imagine they're expecting something, that will still turn without being probably quite Bangladesh. So it's probably a formula that they had an idea of 6 months ago and before the summer played out, and really have not, come away from that.
Yeah, and I guess England have so many established spin options. You've got the main trio who play every game, but Lindsay Smith's had an amazing year as well. So I guess that makes selection slightly easier in that regard. I was having a look at the Australia and India squads, and their balance is very, very similar in terms of the number of seam options they've got. Looking at the Australia squad, I guess the most imposing thing about them is just they've got 1 million all-rounders. They have so many all-rounders, which makes their ability to balance the side so much easier. I wanted to ask you about the inclusion of Heath, because Heath is the least experienced player in that squad. She's someone who's not had an amazing year. She had a difficult 100, and she had a difficult 100 in 2023 as well. What is it that England see in her, and why has she been picked over other young batters?
I just think it's her style of play, really. I think she's very aggressive. She hits the ball to unusual areas. She sort of got that no fear approach. And the other thing that people don't see when, I guess, probably most likely is Bess Heath's not going to play unless Amy Jones goes down. Like, that would be pretty obvious, I'd imagine. And she's a great team person. She's a great person to have around the group. She works incredibly hard. She's incredibly positive. And those sorts of things, if players aren't definitively going to play, you have to bring something to the environment, to the group. And she's a long-term prospect, isn't she? Nobody's necessarily, I hope I'm not speaking out of line here, is nobody's really expecting her to play unless something happens to Amy Jones. So how you carry yourself around the group, what you add to the environment, are you working on your game, and you're working hard around training and nets and things like that? Best brings that in bucketfuls. because she is just an awesome person to have around any team. And I think people do forget that bit, is that, numbers aren't great, or is there other keepers in the country that could potentially be on the plane or whatever. Maybe, maybe not. But what she does do is she fits into that group really nicely. She's a no drama llama. And she works incredibly hard. And I think, you need good people in a group and an environment, particularly in a World Cup.
Yeah, and we often talk as well when looking at squad composition or a team composition for a game or a tournament in Asia, in Bangladesh or the UAE. We talk about the bowling attack quite a lot, but actually you still have to prepare differently for your batting as well. The tests that a batter will have in those conditions is different to them playing a series in England. And I wonder as well with Heath, that someone who has shown a lot in her young career already, she's really capable of getting those like really quick cameos in what could be quite a low scoring tournament. And as you say, she's probably not going to start it. Having someone who has like quite a carefree way of batting is actually perfect for someone coming into the middle of a competition, potentially in quite low scoring games.
Yeah, I think so. I think the other thing is as well is, if you look at if your worst case scenario planning for the World Cup, okay, Bangladesh is probably more likely Jonesy to get sick or injured or whatever than in the UAE, but you never know. Jonesy has back troubles from time to time, things like that. Is what disrupts the composition of your team if Amy Jones goes down? Well, it's Bess Heath, because she bats in the middle order. Jonesy's a 5'6", and that's where Bess would go. Where you look at other options, if you look at a Seren Smale or other batter keepers that are around the country, they're all top order players. Well, they're not going to play in the top order. So then you're trying to botch somebody that is a top order player in the middle order, and it's completely different.
And in the middle of a World Cup, that's not ideal, is it?
Exactly.
Like if you're asking a young player to do a role that they've basically never done before. So I guess, yeah, it's exactly that. It's picking someone for a very specific squad role, which I think is pretty smart. I mean, how do you think England are placed going into the tournament? Because I guess like their playing of spin has been something that's been called into question recently, and as we've discussed, there's going to be a lot of spin in this competition.
Yeah, I think they're placed really nicely. I think, again, it seems like a long time ago, but riding on the back of the Ashes and the white ball stuff, I think the fear of Australia is non-existent now. I don't think that's a thing, where it used to be a bit of a monkey on your back, which obviously helps going into a World Cup. I think they've put a lot of time and effort into playing against spin, and that we've seen it a lot in the 100. England have a lot of players that are very good against spin. Alice Capsey, Heather Knight, Nat Sitterbrunt, Amy Jones. They're all very good players of spin. And the prep and what they've put in place is very specific and decisive in terms of going out to the UAE early, which is an absolute bonus now that it's going to be out there. They've been to India, before the season started. They've sort of left no stone unturned. Everything has been probably as they would hoped it to be. Touch wood, there's no major injuries that have come about, and people are on the back of playing quite well, and been playing in the summer, which I think is a good thing, to almost be in frequent competition. So I think they're played really nicely. I think, the criticism of playing against spin, can often be talked about a lot, but I think you've got to be more specific than that. Is they've struggled against very slow, almost like wide spin against Pakistan, India when they used to bowl like that. But that's a niche market. When you look at actually how a lot of the best teams in the world bowl spin, is your Ash Gardners, your Deepti Sharmas, Amelia Kerr, Alana King. They bowl very different to what was presented with Pakistan when we saw them over in the UK, when a lot of talks about playing spin sort of arose. So I do think it's very different, and I think sometimes it's not always. It's very blanket, isn't it? That they're not good against playing spin. When actually you think about it, it's quite a niche pool of when they struggled.
Yeah, I mean, not all spin is the same. Fundamentally, there was a glimpse of the future in the squads that England have picked for the pair of series they've got coming up against Ireland. So Kate Cross will captain England in both series. She's captaining England for the first time. Across the two squads, there are 7 uncapped players: Hannah Baker, Georgia Davis, Rhiannon McDonald-Gay, Paige Schofield, Georgia Adams, Charis Pavley, and Seren Smale. We've talked about some of those players a fair bit this summer. We've got an interview with Schofield coming up later in the show. So if we park Schofield for a bit, because we'll talk about her later, who are you most excited to see to play for England for the first time?
I think Seren Smale. I think she's a real good prospect moving forward. She's scored a truckload of runs domestically this summer. She's been really decent with the bat. It'll be interesting whether she gets a go with the gloves or not, because, Best is going to the World Cup. She doesn't actually keep for Lancashire, but if you're forecasting, a decent way ahead for England, is she a potential in that role? I'm not sure, but I know that she is a keeper as well. I think Hannah Baker is I don't think we quite saw the best of her in the 100, but I think domestically she's been good for a while. She had a really good, domestic time of it last year and this year. And she's leg spinners are always really exciting because they're wicket takers. So I think that's a really exciting addition. And I'm always going to be a bit biased to me Oval Invincibles, but I think it's only a matter of time before we see Rhiannon McDonald-Gay in an England shirt, not only just in this Ireland series, but I think moving beyond that. I think she's been a standout seamer for the last couple of years, really, and has everything it sort of takes to make that next jump up.
I thought she was brilliant in the 100. I guess one interesting thing about the new faces is that they're not the same profile of players. They're people at different stages of their careers. Georgia Adams, for example, she'll be England's first debutant who's age 30 or more in something like 30 odd years. I guess there are also people wondering why certain players aren't there. Some players who've done really well in domestic cricket recently. A couple of names like Grace Scrivens, who captained the 19s last year and is captains the Sunrisers, who are going well in the Hay Flint Top tournament as well. Eve Jones, who scored millions of runs this week, she's not in there. But I guess it shows that competition for places is really high at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. I think as well, you've got to pick teams based on who's going as well. You've still got Tammy Beaumont. Do you know what I mean? Who's, both Grace Scrivens and Eve Jones are opening batters. Well, with all the numbers in the world, you're not going to get bat ahead of Tammy Beaumont. So there is, and the other thing is as well as it's still an international series, although it's a different looking squad, almost a bit like an A looking squad, an England A side. It's still an international and you still want to win. So you can't, you don't want to go for a completely inexperienced side that maybe are the next crop of England players. Not saying that if this team, if you went with younger players, you'd be compromising that. But there still is an element of this is not club cricket. We're not just here to throw away, to dish out England caps for the sake of it. It's a proper series and you want to win it. So you still need enough experience to complement the youngsters.
And also, it does feel similar in the way that you described Bess Heath's inclusion in the T20 World Cup squad. It looks like the selection for this series has been very specific. It's not, as you say, just, you're a good young player with good numbers recently, come on in. It's actually, where are the possible spots in the first choice England team in the next year or so? And let's have a look at players who could seriously challenge for those spots.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's sometimes easy for people to sort of just look through an ESPN top run scored sort of charts and go, well, then the top 5 need to be on this Ireland tour, when realistically you got to slot them all into a team that you think can beat Ireland. And there's no point having, the top run scorers are always going to be top 3 batters because they get the most chance to bat, but not everybody's going to be able to bat there. So, you've got Tammy on that, you've got Bryony Smith on that, you've got Holly Armitage, you've got all these players that they're all top 3 batters. So you can't then have Eve and Grace Scrivens as well, because where are they all going to go? So I think it's sometimes easy to forget that actually, how do they slot into what our lineup's going to look like? And if that's not, obviously Eve Jones is at a different stage of her career to Grace Scrivens, but I think we all know that it's, if Grace Scrivens continues on the trajectory that she's on at the minute, like, she's a prospect for the future for sure. But she's probably not a prospect batting 5. So what's the point in taking her to an island tour to bat 5?
Well said. There, one other interesting omission was Kirsty Gordon, who opted out of the tour. And I don't know if this will happen, but obviously Kirsty is Scottish. She's played for Scotland before. Scotland have qualified for the T20 World Cup. And because Scotland are an associate member, she can basically go straight back and play for Scotland. And given England's current strength and depth in the spin department, I wonder if that is something that might happen. I think when the squads were announced, John Lewis said something along the lines of there being a conversation where the possibility of Gordon playing for Scotland was part of that wider conversation. But yeah, I've not heard anything either way, so I don't know, just speculation at the moment. Next up, we've got Katya Witney's chat with the other England newbie, Paige Scholfield. Lauren, we talked about Paige earlier in the summer, your teammates at the Invincibles. What can England fans expect from her in an England shirt?
I think the thing about Paige is she's now become quite consistent. I think that she was always a good ball striker. I think the fact that she's injured her back has probably given her a little bit more time to concentrate on her batting. But what she's done recently is she's handled high pressure moments really well, and she's become really consistent in lots of different roles. Like, we used her at the top and in the middle for the Oval Invincibles, and she handled both really well. She's very flexible in terms of she can add a bit of wham bam at the back end because she can clear the ropes. But then we've seen some really good partnerships with her and Cappy where, they handle the pressure well, they get the ball out there, they run well and sort of get the job done and, march off, not out. So I think she's always, since she moved from Vipers to Stars, her game's gone, through the roof, really, in terms of consistency and probably destruction a bit as well, in terms of her ability to clear the ropes. But I think, she's a great prospect, big time. And she's sort of a really good package. She's a great fielder. She's a good athlete. She obviously hasn't bowled the back end of this summer, but she's a handy bowler too. And I think, she's certainly a player that wouldn't look out of place at international cricket.
Well, I mean, just looking at some numbers for her in the 100, she had the 4th highest strike rate in the whole competition, striking it at pretty much 140. And I just remember, was it the opening game where she scored 70 odd, and she was batting with Capsey, and Capsey was just getting off strike and giving the strike to her, which, that's some accolade if Capsey views it that way. So yeah, this is Katya's chat with England newbie Paige Scholfield.
So Paige, thanks for joining the show, and congratulations on your first England call-up. It must have felt like quite a long time coming.
Thank you. To be honest, it was actually a bit of a surprise. Obviously that it's an honour to obviously be called up to play for the national side and something that we strive for in our careers. But I'm just excited to get going and obviously try and do my best out there and see what happens and what comes from it.
Where were you when you got the call? Was it from John Lewis?
I was actually at home. It was quite funny because obviously there's 2 John Lewises. There's John Lewis of the head of the women's full side, and then John Lewis, who we call Judgy, who's head of the England A's, and I thought it was him. So I was like, oh, hey, Judgy, and it turned out it was Big Boss John. So that was a good start. But yeah, I was just at home, and it was quite a nice call actually, and I was buzzing afterwards.
And I guess what people will mostly be aware of you for most recently is the innings that you played in the opening match of the 100 for the Oval Invincibles. You scored 71 of 40 opening the batting. The first time you'd opened the batting in the competition as well, batting with our very own Lauren. That must have felt like it was a bit of a statement innings for you.
To be honest, I'm still trying to come to terms with it. Obviously, it made it a lot easier having Lauren down the other end who's used to opening. So I really utilised using her and just trying to keep the nerves down with obviously all the fireworks and the production around it. But yeah, thankfully for me, it came off that day and it was really nice. I really enjoyed it.
What were the discussions around you opening the batting before the tournament?
JB pretty much pulled me the day before the game and said, look, we've had a discussion as a coaching team. We think you'd be a really good person to take on that role, and how would you feel about doing it? I said, look, I'm more than happy to give something a go once. And luckily, like I said, it came off and I did enjoy it. It's obviously a lot harder with the moving ball, but obviously it's a lot nicer with only having 2 fielders out. So I really enjoyed that side of it. But yeah, no, it was a challenge, and I'm glad I took it on, and thankfully it paid off.
And is opening the batting something that's been on your radar at all before? Because obviously you've batted in quite a lot of different positions throughout the order and across the different formats as well.
No, not really. I've always really seen myself as a number 5 or 6. It's something throughout my career I've tried to work on, being that middle order batter. I must admit I did enjoy opening as much as I was nervous around it, and it's something I would hopefully one day maybe try again, but for now I think focusing on just doing my role at 5 and 6 or where I'm needed for teams.
Is that, do you know, if you're selected in the 11 in Ireland, is that kind of where we could expect you to bat?
To be honest with you, I don't know what my position will be in that series. I'm just happy to be a part of it. They've not really discussed who the 11 will be, so at this moment I'm just going with hopes to obviously make the 11.
And that innings and also the call-up comes at the end of a lot of domestic success for you over the last couple of years. You were in the top 5 run scorers in the Charlotte Edwards Cup this year. You also scored 2 centuries in the RHF last year. And those performances came directly after moving from Southern Vipers to South East Stars. What was the change there, and how do you see that change contributing to that kind of form that you've been able to put together?
I think for me, it was having to take on a bit more responsibility as a player, being one of the senior players, as you call it. Obviously, the Stars are a much younger side. We have a lot less England capped players. So I think, yeah, for me, having to take on that responsibility, and I think Mibes having conversations with me about where he would like to see me in the team really helped me, and it made me go away in my winter and focus on what I needed to do in order to achieve that. So I've worked very closely with Johan Myberg and Darren Stevens, and I owe a lot of credit to them for it. But yeah, I think the main thing it comes down to is the responsibility I've had to take.
What was it that you were working on with your batting with Darren Stevens and the coaches that really helped develop you?
I think for me it was just learning how to build an innings. Previously to that, I was known more for my big hitting and scoring as many runs off as little balls as possible, but it didn't always come off because I maybe lacked in the department of learning how to build my innings. And I think with them, I really focused on allowing myself time to build up into my innings and then going when I needed to, which obviously in the game, the more you're at the crease, the easier it gets, hopefully. So yeah, I think that for me was a big turning point in my batting career.
And where do you see your bowling at the minute? Because I noticed that this year you haven't bowled an awful amount of overs compared to last year and the previous years you've been bowling. So how do you see yourself as an all-rounder inside?
I think, well, it all depends on, unfortunately, I'm carrying a bit of a back injury, so we're just managing that for this season. And then hopefully during the winter, I'm going to have a bit of a rehab block, which will be great. And then going into next season, hopefully fully fit as an all-rounder. But I guess for me, it's just not losing that focus on my batting as well, which I think can come with an all-rounder role. You spend less time on skills because you're trying to cover all 3. But yeah, hopefully I can get back to that all-rounder status and get my bowling back up. But if it's something I potentially don't need, then it may be something that I need to look at, just focusing on my batting.
That's interesting, because a lot of all-rounders I find are quite reluctant to give up their all-rounder status. But is that just, so do you see bowling almost as a luxury to you at this point, or something that you would give up if you needed to? I think within today's game, as an all-rounder, having that extra skill set is very helpful. It's hard now to get into teams. There's so many talented players. There's a lot of talented young players coming through. So just having that extra skill set, if you don't quite come off with the bat or ball, vice versa, you've always got that second skill set to fall back on. So I think as all-rounders, you always want to try and keep that in there as much as possible. And especially in franchise cricket, I think it's an attribute that most teams look at, having an all-rounder, because it covers 2 positions with 1 player. So it's something I would like to hold on to if I can, but if my back doesn't allow it, then it's something I'm going to need to reassess. Just going back a bit further and thinking about your background, you were born in South Africa. What was your route into cricket in your childhood?
Actually never played in South Africa, so moved over here when I was 12, and then a PE teacher at school, well, she said, would you like to give it a go? Because I threw a ball quite far. So she said, oh, well, would you like to get involved in the cricket with the boys? So I gave that a go. And it just spiraled from there, really. I went to, I think at the time it was called an ASDA indoor comp or something like that. And then Belgia Green, my local cricket club, were down watching. They then approached me, said, would you like to come down and have a little taster session? I think Laura Marsh was actually doing the taster session at the time, which is quite funny. And then Sussex picked me up. And then, yeah, from there onwards, I've just spiraled into where I'm at now.
There's quite a few players that have come out of Sussex during the time frame that you came through Sussex.
Yeah, no, there's loads. Obviously, you've got Freya Davies. You've got, there was Izzy Collis who was around as well. But yeah, there's quite a few. There was Sarah Taylor and that. She was a bit more before me, but I played with her a lot. So yeah, there's been quite a few that have come out.
And you've been around the professional setup since the Kia Super League days. How can you see like your own kind of career as aligning with the different kind of stages of the professional game in England?
I think the game's grown a lot and it's grown quite quick. Being full-time now as compared to before in the KSL days has allowed players to progress their game a lot quicker and a lot better. And it's allowed for better cricket around the world as well as in the UK. And then you've got the 100, obviously, which came off the back of that. And I think we're up there with competing with other franchise cricket around the world. And with like better setups, we're obviously pushing the Australians as well with where we're at with our cricket, which is always nice.
And what do you see as like particularly important stages for your career during that time?
I think the full-time contracts and staff was a big turning point, having that contact time with staff, being able to have time to develop our skills and not have to worry about working another job. Unfortunately, there's still periods now where people are having to work a second job, but we're moving in the right direction where majority of the team don't have to worry about that. And it just allows players to focus on their game and where they would like to end up. And it just benefits the outcome of the game and what show we can put on for the crowds.
And during that time, during the previous parts of your career, did you ever feel like that England call-up was just never going to come? It was just slightly unobtainable?
Yes, if I'm being honest. I think when I got released from the academy, before I thought that was it, that was the door shut, because obviously at that time, if you were at a ripe old age of 23, you potentially weren't going to make it into the team, which is fair enough. They obviously want to develop players and build for the future and that. But I think the game now, the women's game, has moved in the direction of the men's game, where I don't think that's as much as a factor. It's pretty much who's performing at the minute, or who's got future talent in them. So I think, yeah, moving forward, it's opened my eyes up that maybe it is still an option, but before I would say no.
We can see that with other players who are going to the Ireland Tour, like Georgia Adams has been called up to the Ireland Tour. We've seen Holly Armitage, who's been around for quite a while, who's played a couple of England games this year. It must be quite heartening almost that it's been so difficult for quote unquote older, at the ripe old age of 28, players to have their call-ups for England now.
Yeah, I think just the way the women's game's gone, it's been amazing and opening that door for us again, giving us almost that second chance. But also for the future girls coming in now, like not having to have that pressure that they have to be in the England setup by the age of 23, etc. They do have time to build themselves as athletes and potentially knock on that door whenever. So yeah, it's exciting times, and I think Georgia and Holly will agree with me in that we're all very thrilled to be a part of the Island Series, and we can't wait to get going again.
Do you feel like almost having that extra experience behind you is going to help you on the tour or whatever the future might bring with England?
Yeah, a little bit. We've had obviously being a part of the academy, we've had a bit of an insight into how they work and what they want from players. But I guess you always go into it wanting to do well, regardless if you've been a part of it or not. There'll be some nerves around, but excitement as well. But yeah, we'll just obviously fall back onto our experience that we've got through the 10 years plus we've played, and just putting that into practice in the Island Series.
And if you could have your ideal career going ahead from now, what would that career look like?
Representing my country, hopefully, a bit more, but also being a part of franchise cricket. I think it's exciting times with that now, and I'd love to travel the world playing cricket. We watch a lot of the girls doing it, like your Nats and your Ishmaels and Cappies and etc. But yeah, that's something I would love to get involved in. But I think for me, representing my country would be amazing and a real honour.
But with the franchise cricket stuff, do you see England as almost a non-essential part of getting those gigs now and in the future? You've got exposure in the 100, and now through your first England gig, do you see that as almost like the path that it's going to take?
Yeah, look, I think it's a lot easier to get into franchise cricket now if you're non-England capped. However, I think if you speak to most of the girls playing in England, they would rather play for their country than not. So I think, yes, it's an added bonus being a part of a franchise corporation, but I think the main goal for most girls in England is to play for their country.
Cool. That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Lauren. Cheers, listeners. We'll see you at the same time next week. And remember, throughout the cricket season, Metro Bank is supporting and celebrating potential and existing volunteers and coaches of girls cricket. Head to Metro Bank's Instagram and X channels to watch the stories of 3 cricket heroes as they're thanked by England players and the girls at their club.